Hello, everybody. Welcome to Colonomic Action Team. We're going to get started here in just a few minutes. Hope you are all doing well. So, welcome to our replay session with the Colonomic Action Team, and welcome everyone. We'll get started here in a minute. And this is going to be amazing webinar from John Liu. John Liu is the movie maker, the activist, and environmental advocate for regenerative agriculture. So you'll find a lot of helpful information in this. Hopefully you'll enjoy this. So we'll get started here in a few minutes. Hold on tight. And type in where you're at in the world. So everybody, this is the top of the hour. And
and give us the next slide on this thing. So, yeah, I mean, really, what we're doing often, and I notice this in myself as I'm looking at this political situation, he who must not be named, and the political situation which is happening all over the world. We're thinking that our time is so important. It's more of this arrogance that we're important. We're not that important. We're going to die relatively soon. Thinking about Toby passing away, Bill Mollison recently. I mean, we're here for a very short time. We're just passing through. And we need to understand this. And we need to get this in perspective. And this is actually comforting. It's a little bit awesome to think about these things, but it's also very, very important that we do. You don't want to wait to the last minute to think about this. Let's go to the next slide and see where my thoughts are taking us in the... So, basically, I've been calling it the great work of our time, the idea that we can do this. And I started to come up with what's required. So about 10 years ago, 10 years into my research, I was really keen on making everybody listen to me. I think I was becoming a little bit hard to take. I know my family was saying, would you stop talking about soil and water? We don't care anymore. Leave us alone. But I wasn't willing to stop. And I found out that, if you want to do ecosystem restoration, you've got to have the understanding that it's possible to do it, because it's too big. If you don't know that it can be done, you're definitely not going to do it. You need sufficient technical and scientific understanding, or you'll mess up. I mean, you have multiple symbiotic systems. So you need to understand how each of these functions. You need an enabling policy environment, because you're really talking about something which is different. A lot of people, even in our cooperative, we have a lot of people talking about private property and public property and, land trusts and all sorts of things. Well, this is these are human overlays. What I'm talking about is ecological function on the earth, and a responsibility of human beings as a species, not as individuals, not as landowners, not as, but as human beings, as sentient beings. Somehow we're stewards of the land because we have sort of this frontal lobe problem and opposable thumbs, and now we're just a destructive force, but we don't have to be a destructive force. It depends on our intention. So an enabling policy environment is important because without this, you really can't get to the scale. The scale is important. You need sufficient capital. I should say that $500 million was invested in the List Plateau over 10 years. But it's an area of 35,000 square kilometers. So imagine 35,000 square kilometers and 10 years. And you realize that per kilometer or even per capita, the investment is tiny. So compared to other types of investments, we look at, these people who say, well, we're going to put up another satellite, and that's going to help us to measure something or other. We're going to have new LIDAR, something. Well, that's not going to do anything for us. It's going to give us better measurement. But if we want to address climate, we're going to have to re-regulate the hydrological cycle. We're going to have to sequester carbon. We're going to have to revegetate. So gradually I started to realize we have to do this. This is the work that we have to do. And total participation is the fifth thing. So if we have these criteria, we get a good result. Let's go to the next slide. And then I think what we're going to see now, 10 years ago, I was asked by the World Bank, the Global Environment Facility, and the British government to go to Africa. And so I'm going to, can you do something with the audio here or not?
Well, I'm about to play the video.
On the video. I play the video, and then can you modulate the audio on the video or not?
I'll try changing.
Don't do that first. Just start it, and then start it, and after the first bit, you can maybe moderate it. I know. Okay, yeah. So I went to Africa to do this. I was pretty impressed by the way they looked at it. So this is in Rwanda. Many things that I've seen in Rwanda remind me of some of the things that I've seen in China. The Chinese government was asking this generation and all the generations alive today to change the course of human history, to take the denuded landscape that they had and somehow alter this. Okay, Raleigh, if you could lower the audio, I would appreciate it.
I'm going to present to you about a place
And I'll
which is called
just keep talking over this a little bit.
Plateau. It's in
It's
China.
not being altered.
Known as the most eroded place on Earth.
I mean, basically, the Africans took this very seriously. And I got to present at the highest levels all over the world. I mean, all over Africa, in South Africa, Tanzania, Rwanda, and Ethiopia. And what was interesting about this was the Rwandans, for instance, they rewrote their land use policy laws. And they wrote me a letter and said, thank you, we're rewriting our land use policy laws because we believe you. Now, that was 10 years ago. So during this period of the last 10 years, there's a lot of results in Rwanda. And they're returning their hydrological resources, which is important because they're the headwaters of the White Nile and the Congo rivers. And then they're getting back their biodiversity. They have food security at the same time that there's famine in other parts of East Africa. And they had 8.2% economic growth during this global depression, which started in 2008. So there's a lot of evidence coming out of Rwanda that, and also Ethiopia. Ethiopia shifted $380 million a year away from food aid. Food aid was the response to the famines in Ethiopia in the 1980s. Well, at the time that they were getting food aid, their population went from 25 million to 75 million, and their landscapes didn't get any better. So when I went there and showed them this, they just went, "Oh my goodness, this is what we need to do." Ethiopia is an enormous place. And what they did was they shifted the 380 million in development aid away from food assistance to sustainable land management. This is a much better idea because now they've just gone through a period of severe drought, but you don't have the type of famine that you had in the 80s because they've had a decade of restoring their hydrological cycle and their soil fertility and infiltration so they can retain moisture in the soils and in the ground rather than just have the place bake. So, you know, there's quite a lot of evidence emerging over the last few years about this. And that has taken me to ask other questions. So as a journalist, you know, if I were covering a story for CBS or something, you know, I'm looking at who, what, when, where. And, you know, so I know all of this, and then the last thing I want to know is why? Why is this happening? And what I found was, oh my goodness, you know, I understand it. It's the intentions. What are the intentions of society? So that original sin issue is not simply a question of just degrading biodiversity. It's a question of what is our intention. And when our intention is something different, when our intention is to do something for the earth, for future generations, and not simply for ourselves, we are definitely going to have a different result. And I think this is what's interesting to see, that these massive restoration projects, and the other, at the same time that these developments are going on, so I didn't know anything about permaculture, for instance, but gradually what I realized was that the principles that were emerging in permaculture were the same principles which I was seeing in large-scale ecosystem restoration. So I think there is a definite correlation between large-scale ecosystem restoration and permaculture. But I think what I've noticed is sometimes permaculture, the scale of it is a bit smaller. Let's look at the next slide. What's the next slide? Where is the next slide? Because I'm worried about the time. Okay, so you know, we're facing all these enormous problems, and we really want to know why. So the population, we're at 7.5 billion people. We're adding 1 billion people every 12 years. We're facing biodiversity loss, climate change, pollution, corruption, economic collapse, migration, war. These are enormous issues. But they're basically all interrelated. So if we try to focus on any single one of those, we're unlikely to actually have a result. We're going to have to take them all together and realize how they're connected. And I think that ecosystem restoration is, you know, whatever future is going to happen on the earth for human beings, whatever is the future of human civilization, you know, the earth actually is going to be fine. It's human beings who are at risk. And so whatever the future is going to be for human beings, it's going to be better with functional ecosystems. So we need to look at these problems and realize what would happen to, let's say, population growth. A lot of people talk about population growth. What would happen to population growth if we did large-scale ecosystem restoration on a planetary scale? Well, to do large-scale ecosystem restoration on a planetary scale, you have to have tremendous amounts of vocational training. Now, what I would recommend is don't talk about this, but just put it in there and have access to contraception, women's rights, and family planning just as part of vocational training for ecosystem restoration. So you don't talk about population, family planning, or population at all. You just put it in there as part of the vocational training to restore ecosystems. The population growth rates will go flat. They have everywhere where there's access to contraception, women's rights, and family planning. So this is the fastest way to control population growth. Biodiversity is massively increased in the Loess Plateau. And, you know, some people ask about incorrect species. You know, I saw somebody who's asking about black locust and other species. What we're seeing now is that if you kind of emulate pioneer species, you have to be a little careful about invasives, definitely. But if you emulate pioneer species, a lot of pine has been planted out too, certainly around Beijing. What we're seeing now is oaks and beeches naturally reoccurring in those areas, and they need to be nurtured in order to, so what's the fastest way to reverse biodiversity loss? We need carbon sequestration to reduce climate changes. We need the microclimates to change the temperature differentials. Pollution, we don't need pollution at all. That's a question of intention. The corruption, the economic collapse, we need to realize what is true. So migration war, well, let's go to the next slide. And let me see, Raleigh, stay with me. Next slide, please. There we go. So now why? Let's go to the next slide from there. Who, what, when, where, why. So let's look at Mali. So Mali is a place where I learned something quite important. Let's look at this. And video John will talk about it.
Okay, Mali, here we go.
I'm John D. Liu. I've been traveling throughout the world to learn about how ecosystems function, seeking a path to a sustainable future. On this trip, I've begun to study and document the inner Niger Delta in Mali. Although I've been many times to the continent, this is my first visit to this part of West Africa. I'm immediately struck by the compelling beauty of the people and the extreme ecological importance of the land. Traveling north from Mali's capital, Bamako, and following the Niger River, I find a complex ecological system with a very important role in regulating the Earth's hydrological cycle, weather patterns, and climate. There are patches of wetlands where rich plant diversity and bird life are evident. As we travel further north, I notice that the vegetation cover begins to thin. I'm told that much of the natural tree cover has been lost over centuries and millennia from burning wood for fuel and clearing the land for agriculture. This has caused a continuous loss of fertility and moisture and has made the simple traditional agriculture practiced here a precarious livelihood. We begin to see patches of bare, exposed earth, the result of large-scale herding of domestic animals. The government, with international development assistance, has sought to regulate the river with several dams. The reasoning behind building the dams is to control flooding, to generate electricity, and to provide irrigation to increase agricultural productivity. Below the dams are rice paddies, banana and sugarcane fields. These benefits are fairly easy to quantify, and for some seem compelling justification for building the dams. But many scientists have questioned these large engineering solutions because they massively alter the natural river system. The dams reflect the assumption that the productivity from agriculture is more valuable than the natural biological diversity or the ability to naturally regulate the complex interactions of the wetlands, the weather, and the climate. This is increasingly important because yet more dams are planned. As I begin to see the vital role that the Inner Niger Delta plays, it becomes clear that the decisions made concerning more dams will not only affect the people of the region, but the whole of North Africa and the world. For someone interested in how Earth systems function, there is much to learn in Mali. Every year, a dramatic change comes to the Inner Niger Delta. Each year in the rainy seasons, the waters flowing from the Ghanaian highlands steadily rise to flood the lowlands below. The level typically rises as high as 6 meters over a vast area. The people who live in the delta, by long habit, know approximately what to expect. They prepare themselves and put all their belongings onto boats to seasonally migrate to higher ground. The people depend on the floods arriving as expected to bring back the waters after the dry season, to nurture the thirsty plants, to provide habitat for fish, and to provide the rhythm as well as the source of their lives. The flooded delta is a fascinating and unique ecosystem. It takes me some time to realize what huge amounts of water are present. The delta is a nesting ground for precious, rare, migratory birds. Specially adapted plants like these Borgo grasses provide habitat for the fish that traditionally provided employment for many and fed the people. These flood forests are made up of a very special subspecies of the acacia tree, Acacia kirki. These trees spend part of the year submerged and part of the year on dry land. During the flood season, these trees drink deeply, absorbing water that remains in the local system during the drier periods. Over generations, the relentless desire to extract something that can be converted to income has vastly reduced the area covered by these trees. As these specialized habitats have been lost, the hydrological function has decreased. Many people who have never been here may perhaps be forgiven for assuming that it is inevitable for ecosystems to be depleted. But those who study this know that there is little or no biophysical reason why this ecosystem must continue to degrade. In Mali, there is even evidence of trees of gigantic size. This suggests that natural vegetation was at one time enormously larger than today. I begin to wonder, would it be possible to restore this, and what this would mean for climate control? Actively restoring vegetation here would certainly improve the lives of the people by providing them with locally and globally important work. Restoration would improve hydrological retention in a fragile part of Africa, reducing the spread of the desert, helping to control extreme weather events, and reducing human impact on the climate by naturally sequestering carbon. Mali's population of just 14 million people live in an area of 1,200,000 square kilometers. This is less than the population of Los Angeles, living in an area almost twice the size of France. From traditional reckoning, Mali is one of the poorest countries on the earth, near the bottom of many of the United Nations Human Development Indicators. The degradation and the poverty in Mali seem to be the result of a failure to value the ecosystem function. To insist that fragile but important ecological zones have no value unless they produce goods and services bought and sold by the global economy is simply wrong. Given the risks of human-induced climate change, this is an enormous mistake. Here on the Inner Niger Delta in Mali, it's possible to see the effects of valuing productivity over function. We fail to understand that the Earth's water, its unique species of life, and its climate are regulated from places just like this. When these systems are fully functional, everybody on Earth benefits. But if we fail to value these essential functions, the local people are forced to degrade them just to survive. What's the value of the Earth's water, or biodiversity, or climate regulation? How could we consign to poverty those of us whose task it is to protect these essential functions? There is much to learn about how the Earth's ecosystems function in the Inner Niger Delta, and we have only begun to scratch the surface. But it is clear that the hydrological, weather, and climate regulatory functions alone in the Inner Niger Delta are not only extremely valuable, but are absolutely necessary for human survival. I'm looking forward to learning more on my next visit to Mali and seeing how efforts to expand understanding and restoration of this unique and important region are progressing. Okay, let's stop that. You don't have to watch all that. Yeah. So let's go right away to the next video,
Okay.
because I think we're way over time now.
All right, next video. Here we go.
So this is really my thinking on why. And the world is facing multiple problems. We have biodiversity loss, climate change, desertification, food insecurity, poverty, disparity, and now the threat of financial collapse. It seems like there are two conversations going on. One in the developed world, which is talking about economics and technical solutions, and another one in the developing world, which is talking about survival and sustainability. I've begun to see this differently. When it comes to survival and sustainability, there's only one story for the human species, and we're all in this together. All our problems are interrelated. Far from being mysterious, they're actually the logical outcomes of the type of economic system that we have created. And this also seems to point toward the solution. We know when we see a forest, a lake, the ocean, a natural river system, the atmosphere, that it's more valuable than computers, cars, or airplanes, which are valuable for a short time, but then become trash and pollution. Natural systems are renewable. They've evolved over billions of years, and they are infinitely valuable. Now, the global economy values production and consumption. And although few understand it, speculation. This has suggested the finite derivative shaped from the Earth's natural systems are somehow more valuable than the infinitely renewable systems themselves. This is simply wrong. We need to admit that we made this mistake. If we were to truly value natural systems, then nature would become the basis of our money and our economy. To protect nature then would not be a luxury, but a necessity. This brings us much closer to the truth, because we must have water, air, and fertile soils, but we just want computers, cars, and airplanes. We can change. It will not be easy, but we can and we must do it. I think there are two possibilities. If we are thoughtful and do the right thing, then we can consciously transition to a new paradigm in which human actions and the natural environment are in harmony. The other possibility is that the current system implodes from its own corruption and mistakes, and we're forced to try to salvage whatever we can of human civilization. For the sake of the children and future generations of life, we need to consciously decide to do the right thing. When we do that, we'll understand that wealth is coming from natural ecosystem function. And this will be the basis of our money. And all human actions will go to conserving and protecting and restoring ecological function on Earth. We need to shift societal intent away from the production and consumption and waste of the economic system as we see it now, and realize that wealth is coming from natural ecosystem function. If we run out of water, if we run out of fertile soils, if we run out of air, if we alter the climate, our money is worthless. We have to understand that the true wealth on the earth is coming from natural ecological function. And if we do this, if we choose this, then our money and our economy will reflect that. And all human activity will go toward conservation and, wherever the land is degraded, restoration. Because that's the way to protect wealth, and that's the way to increase wealth.
Okay, let's turn that off and immediately go to the next video, if possible, please. So you need to do the same process, yeah. Now open the video. I want to get to the camps, so we're doing what's coming up next is in Common Land. So we have a big project with Common Land, which has several projects in South Africa, in Spain, and Australia. So I wanted you to look at this. It's a small, short animation. Go ahead.
Okay, Common Land video.
Yeah.
The world. Once there was plenty of space, but the population is rapidly increasing, and people are consuming more and more. That has a big impact on our environment and ecosystems. A quarter of the once fertile land on Earth is now dust and sand as a result of human activity. The quality of our future depends on our ability to change these developments. The good news is it can be done with landscape restoration. That's more than just the recovery of land, because a landscape is also a community. People can revitalize an area, An economy that restores and uses the landscape with sustainable business cases. That's the goal. It all begins with inspiration, with a new future perspective for all those involved, and a common plan for restoration of the landscape. From this, jobs are created, and that leads to social bonding, and, for example, education and security. Restoration also leads to the return of natural capital, such as biodiversity, fertile land, water, and a stable climate. That attracts financial capital, first as an investment, later as a return. This is what we call the four returns. Return of inspiration, return of social capital, return of natural capital, and return of financial capital. To achieve these four returns, we developed 3 landscape zones. A natural zone in which biodiversity is restored and maintained. A combined zone, which is rehabilitated with farmers working the land. And an economic zone for sustainable business activity. It takes an average of 20 years, in other words, a generation, to restore a landscape. If we start now, we will create the basis for a different world. This is what inspires us.
Okay, could you, Raleigh, go right to the next one? So the next slide, you're still use the same method.
Yep.
Not real wealth. You want to go to. You're going the wrong direction with those. You want to go to the camping. 12. Yeah. So, you know, what we're working on is the creation of the Ecosystem Restoration Cooperative and Ecosystem Restoration Camps. This is different from the Common Land projects. So this is owned by a cooperative. There are now 7,300 or more people who are signed up in this cooperative. We want to build the camps ourselves. So the first thing we're going to do is build shops in order to build the cooperative. We have about 800 people who have joined this. In these shops, we're going to build the dwellings that we're going to use. We're going to experiment with different kinds, but we think teepees, yurts, and domes are pretty good. It could be Bedouin tents or safari type tents, depending on the conditions. We want them to be really comfortable with floors. They're dry, warm, and we're going to create these camps for people. Now this is slightly different because we're going to have walkways. We don't want people walking directly on the ground and causing compacted earth. We're going to put these camps in places where we're invited, and we're going to put these camps in places which are highly degraded. So the idea is to grow organic soils, to infiltrate and retain moisture using integrated watershed management techniques, and to propagate and plant out enormous amounts of keystone species, and then also to grow organic soils through composting, large-scale composting systems. But the first thing we need to do is make sure that we can learn to produce the camps and learn to camp well. So by creating the shops, we can make even tools and furniture. We'll be able to produce everything for the camps. And what we are hoping for is that, and what we're finding is that this is appealing to a large number of people who want to go and do something, to have direct action in mitigation and adaptation. We're also seeing that we're going to have to feed the people in the camp, so we're going to be doing polyculture and food forests and so on to do this. We're going to be using gray water recycling. We're going to be in some very degraded landscapes, so we're going to be very careful in order to feed the people, in order to do this. But there are two tracks to this. One is large-scale ecosystem restoration, and one is regenerative agriculture. So we're going to have a lot of people who are going to come together and collaborate to study this. And then more and more people can come and study. Probably most people will come for a few weeks or a few months, and all the conditions. You won't have to bring anything. You just will try to take care of all the basic needs, housing, and there'll be saunas and toilets and shower systems, laundry systems, industrial scale kitchens to feed everybody. And we'll use those kitchens to also do food processing and study food processing. We'll also do seed savings, so we'll be able to do quite a lot of things. This is Renee
The most
Holler.
important thing is to, as fast as possible, get vegetation to grow. And that can be, again, done in very adverse areas.
So he does even
What
mining
happens
tailing.
now, there's hardly a place in these quarries down there which has no vegetation. There's grass, there's trees, everything. Before, it was 2.5 square kilometers of desert.
So this is Chinese-style tree nurseries. Again, they're doing amazing tree nurseries. These are ready for transplantation, and those are expandable. The root balls are expandable. They transmit the mycorrhiza together with the trees. The whole root ball's intact. It's pretty serious. This is an older technique. This is called fish scale terracing. It's not as effective. They have a slightly lower, they've removed the root ball, but it also works. This is in South Africa in the Learning Village. This is also connected to one of the Common Land projects, but it actually was started by students. So this is one of the things that we saw, was that students could go and start something. And it's not theoretical then. This is now very, very large. This is their nursery system, very big nursery system with keystone species. If we do this in all the camps, grow soils, propagate the keystone species, and engage large numbers of students and volunteers to plant out. So this is the plan. And these are people in Ethiopia who are leading the shift to sustainable land management. And they're very well educated, very motivated, and very capable, and it works very well. And we see that so far, in my experience, in every place around the world where we go, it's possible to do restoration. And it doesn't exactly matter, where it is. It matters that you have this. This is in Mexico, in Chiapas, and they're also planting out keystone species, very large numbers, community development. So we have about 25% of the earth that's been degraded now by human agricultural systems, and we can do much better than that. And I think that we now know from the approximately 800 people who have joined the cooperative, and we expect this to get very large, that we're going to have more and more people who are joining this. And we will be able to change those areas and start to return function. And we want to make sure that there are three organic meals per day for everybody there. We want to make sure that everybody that's in the camps is taken care of. We want to reduce the workload to maybe about 5 hours per day. So we want to do restoration, but we don't want to exhaust ourselves, and we want to have fun. We kind of want to set a standard so that these camps, once we get very good at camping, we want to use biogas and solar. We want to be off-grid. And what happens with these camps is that they can then, once we're good at it, I wouldn't say that theoretically we want to have passive solar, super insulated greenhouses, shade houses, whatever is required in the areas. Managed grazing, I noticed somebody was saying that I didn't understand about managed grazing, but what the problem really with animals is unrestricted animals. It's not. It's not. It's about consciousness, not about animals. Animals are good, but in these camps, we'd like to have multiple generations, and I think we should just go to questions now. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take some. Thank you for listening to me. I appreciate it. So, what are you getting questions? Or oh, Neil is here. Hello,
Yeah,
Neil.
Neil's on the line, everybody.
Do you want to ask me
I
something, Neil?
didn't hear the whole time, but I've been muted. I came in a little bit late, but hi, John, and hi, everybody else. Great to have you all here.
Yeah, okay. So, again, fantastic presentation. That was incredible. We're going to open it up to Q&As. So let's open, if you have some questions you had to ask during the presentation, now's the time to ask them. So first one I saw was from Aaron. He says, do you include primitive skills, wild edible medicinal plants, and hunting in any of your models?
Well, you know, what I think in terms of this camping, the ecosystem restoration cooperative and ecosystem restoration camps, what these are communities of people who come together, and they should definitely study all of that. I think we have the opportunity to do seed saving. I think we have the opportunity to do food processing. I think we have the opportunity to do phyto and myco remediation. Some of these places in war zones have really serious pollution, mining pollution in other places. So, you know, if we choose, if our intention is to restore the earth, then we're going to have to study those things together. We're not going to be able to say, I know everything, let's go out and do it my way. We have to go with the collective consciousness of the community of people who are studying ecological function on the planet. That's my feeling. So all of those things should be included.
Great. So Eric asked, where can I sign up for one of the camps?
Well, the first thing that you can do is sign up for the Ecological Ecosystem Restoration Cooperative if you feel that you can. Now, to join the cooperative requires a commitment of 10 euros per month. So all the people who are joining the cooperative are pledging to provide 10 euros per month, which comes out to 120 euros per year. And we haven't asked for any money yet because we're waiting till we have 1,000 members to collect money. But we are already moving now to various governance systems and discussions. The discussion now is about participation and transparency. The structures that have been discussed now haven't completely been decided, but they seem to be moving in this direction, is to have sorry, Raleigh, you're scrolling, knocked me off my thing. Right. But to have a foundation, and then each camp would be a limited liability company, which would be a bit more like a benefit corporation. So each one would have articles of association which say very clearly this is for educational purposes. It's connected to the cooperative, but it's separate, so it might even be able to do its own fundraising or be part of a specific project. We think that, for instance, veterans who come back and have post-traumatic stress disorder, or refugees from war zones, or or refugees who are just drifting now. They have nowhere to go. Maybe by setting up these camps to help train people in ecosystem restoration, instead of having them just do nothing, they can study and learn this. And actually, by restoring the landscape around the camp, they can actually leave. One, they can feed themselves, and two, when they leave and go home, the place isn't trashed. So if you look at those places where the refugees are now in Europe, when they're gone, it's a wasteland. So all of that is an opportunity, I think. But more importantly, I think there are just so many people who are just disgusted with the direction that the society is going. So the idea that our purpose on the earth is to go shopping is really not very satisfying to people. And they want some other kind of purpose. And what I found in my own life is that to choose to work toward ecosystem restoration is very, very satisfying. And I've taken a different tact. I know a lot of people, there becomes consultants, or they set up companies or something like this. But basically what I've done is I've just said, well, my education as I've been studying this, it's all there on the academia site. Check it out, and it's free, because it's more like a right than it is a commodity. And I think what I noticed was that I'm starting to, instead of creating income, what I've been trying to do is create value. And this actually works very well, and I hope more people will consider how you do that, because if you create value, it's real wealth. If you create income, it's money, and this money is coming from extraction, from manufacturing, from buying and selling things, and from speculation between cost price and interest-bearing debt. And basically, the majority of that is corrupt, and the rest of it is polluting and destructive. So we have a destructive economy and a destructive social system, and we need to have something else. Instead of having this kind of tragic, unsatisfying thing, we need to live with joy and generosity and consciousness and sharing, that sort of thing. So in the camps, we get a chance to do that for a few weeks or a few months. Anybody who comes there, we want to take this right outside of the transactional economy. It's not like you get charged to go to camp. You get to camp. You have to schedule. You can't just show up at camp and say, "Here I am," But there's got to be a bed and a place to sleep and enough food for everybody. But when we get enough camps, we're going to continue to make as many camps as possible so as many people can study this. And then they can be invited to go places. So the first camp we're working on is in Spain. But we've already had invitations in Nepal and Kenya and Peru and Mexico and Haiti, and so all of these places. And what we're going to start to do is to see, can we just continue to grow? Can individual free people? Because I've been watching the climate discussions now for decades, and I have no confidence that the big institutions and the governments are ever going to lead us out of this, because they're dedicated to more economic growth in this pre-paradigm economic system, which is destructive. So I don't see how they could possibly get us out of this. So what I do see is that more and more individuals see that, well, this is crazy. We're going to destroy the earth. And future generations are going to have nothing. They're going to have no water, no soil fertility, no biodiversity. It's terrible. So let's do something else. And when you get to this realization, you think, well, maybe we have to have a serious change in lifestyle. And so that lifestyle has to be sort of not a consumption, but like a restoration. We need to heal ourselves. So how can we do that in a comfortable way? I mean, I'm not suggesting that we go live in caves or something. I'm suggesting that we glamp. Let's make very high quality, dry, warm dwellings. They're movable. So if we restore an area to the point where the springs are flowing again, we need to go to, to another place. And that's the camp. I mean, everybody who goes to the camp, they should stay there for long enough to learn the techniques they need to make their own landscapes and their families and their communities as resilient as possible. So the answer to your question about how to sign up is, we're working on this. You can go to the cooperative if you have money and you want to join the cooperative. Go ahead. If you don't have any money, you don't have to pay to go to the camps. You don't have to be a member of the cooperative to go camping. You have to schedule a place as a camper. And when you do that, then you'll go there. You'll have a few hours, like 5 hours a day of work is what we're talking about now, to grow, propagate trees, to work in gardens and orchards and food forests, and to do watershed management and to grow organic compost. 5 hours a day of work. And the rest of the time, it's about recreation and culture and meditation and yoga and conflict resolution, because we think this is also the way to address some of the other problems that we have. We leave the transactional economy, we work to restore the ecology, and we consider and discuss and participate in peace building, in intercultural relations. We have now 73 different nationalities who have already joined the cooperative. So this is a huge movement that is, self-organizing and self-governing. So the people who understand this and want to do this, and as that continues to grow, and as we, now it remains theoretical until we build the first camp. But the first camp is coming very, very soon. So if you're interested in this, that's the way forward.
Cool. We'll put a link up too for it. So Susan asks, thank you so much. How are you getting funding for this? Where are the camps being planned at the moment?
Okay. We have decided that if we reduce this to the logistics, that it's much cheaper. I noticed in some permaculture things it's been going to pay systems and so on, like consultancies and things. We haven't decided to do that. We've been trying to do everything with volunteers. Mainly, I'm 64 years old, so one of the great ideas is to have as many older people as possible to contribute their time and effort to make this possible, because maybe they don't have the same pressures as young people do at this time. But what I personally hope is that we have a multi-generational, like we have children and we have old people and we have young people and middle-aged people and everybody together. Like, bring your grandparents and your parents and your children. Let's all go camping. And in doing this, we leave the transactional economy and we do restoration. So on the one hand, we don't have many costs except for the cost. We're trying to figure out how do you feed everybody and how do you build the places, and we're invited onto the land, so we don't have any cost for that. So this is a way forward. It's an experiment, and if it works, then can we use it elsewhere? And it looks like, yeah, we could use it in lots of places. There's a lot of places with degraded landscapes which have no people and no skills to do this. Now, gradually, what we see is, okay, other people want to give us money. So we say, well, okay, you want to give us money, okay, but, this is directed by the people. This is not directed by the United Nations or another thing. This is directed by citizens, because if we don't do this, if we don't self-organize and self-govern, we can't reach the scale on a planetary scale rapidly. the institutional development for development projects is 3 or 4 years. You know, they write these giant proposals, they're huge books of things which are really dogmatic. You know, if you and I say, let's work together, we can reach an agreement in a few seconds. But, you know, if we agree and we have trust. So, I mean, the question is, can we go to a trust society, or are we in this legalistic thing? And if you're in this legalistic thing, do you really have much faith in that, you know, that system? You know, to me, I don't have any faith in, you know, this large document doesn't help me to believe in that. It just means it's so complicated that it's probably corrupt and benefiting somebody else, not, you know, and I think a lot of people are having this kind of reaction to it. So how do we work? So if we have individual camps have individual governance, and if we have people and communities who invite us to go in and put a camp there, and then I think with these skills, people are ready to join eco-villages or to create eco-villages. And I think now we have a lot of people in the eco-village network who are in the cooperative, and they're talking about, well, some of the eco-villages, they don't work very well. People get angry, and they, you know, somebody sleeps with somebody, and, you know, it's over. And, you know, I think that this is, you know, camping is a little bit less than marriage, you know. I mean, you know, like you say, well, like, let's go start an eco-village, and we're going to live together for the rest of our lives. Well, you know, you better be real, you know, sincere there. But if you go camping and you say, okay, like, here's a few weeks or a few months, now be on your best behavior when you come to camp, please, you know, and don't bring your stuff, you know, don't bring a lot of things, you know, because you're going to have a bed, and you're going to have bedding, and you're going to have food, and, you know, you don't bring anything. Just bring yourself. And, you know, sign up, organize it, and if you want to help to be a leader, and you want to be part of the cooperative that's leading this, you know, by all means, join that. And then get into the discussions. Some of the discussions, I would say, are tedious, you know, when they start talking about how to organize and how to govern and what's important and who makes decisions and, you know, private property, public property, commons. You know, these are long, long conversations. And so, you know, they're a little bit tedious. I would rather, you know, grow soils and propagate trees and do watershed management, and then have pizza night and, you know, play guitar around the fire and tell stories. You know, that's what I would prefer. But we're going to have to do all these things, and we're going to have to do it with great humility and try to work in, you know, with joy at a time when the existing society and economy is in pretty serious, you know, problems.
All right.
I'm talking
so,
too much.
No worries. People sign in to hear you talking. So Daniel Hazley asked, does ecological restoration need to be a certain size to be climatically effective? What is the tipping point in rebooting the hydrological cycle?
I think that you kind of need to you kind of need to reach river basin scale. But, you know, you can increase productivity and with a microclimate in a smaller area, but you can't probably affect ecosystems, you know, because, you know, you have to reach this sort of larger scale. So you have the small hydrological cycle and you have the large hydrological cycle, and they interact. And what I have seen in the Loess Plateau, it's 35,000 square kilometers. So this is approximately the size of the Netherlands or the size of Belgium. So when you reach that scale, you're sort of talking about this. It's the upper and middle reaches of the Yellow River. So it's having a big impact. It was a huge importance historically, both in ancient times and in contemporary times. It was an important place, but river basin scale.
All right. Kim asks, how involved is Common Land in the CAM Cooperative? Depending on the answer, she's got a couple of follow-up questions.
Okay. Common Land has, so when I started to discuss this with Common Land, they weren't too keen on it. They thought it was an okay idea, but they from a management perspective, it seems unwieldy. So for them, they're from the business school and project development and investment areas. So they weren't very interested. But a few of the people who work in Common Land were interested, and they joined as members. So I think there are probably 5 or 6 different members and who are inside Common Land. And they're getting more and more interested in it as it develops. And they have offered a grant. So the grant is almost equal to the that is being discussed. We'll have to see how it goes, but it's almost as big as the pledges from the members. So with this grant, what I'm suggesting is that this grant goes to buy the woodworking and metalworking shops and all the materials, because this is easy to show to the foundation and just show them the receipts for the materials and the machines. And we're going to put up probably a canvas farm building up in Spain and put that in there. And then we're trying to find 5 or 10 people from the cooperative who would like to go and work in that, who have the skills necessary to start this, and we'll build the first camp as much with volunteerism as possible, and we'll try to conserve the monies that are coming in from the members, because we're going to have to feed everybody 3 meals a day for every day, 365 days, 3 meals a day. So that's the answer to that. What are your follow-up questions then?
I guess she's going to ask them down below.
Okay.
Aaron asked, have you looked into Podolansky biodynamics? And he says also the same thing, Alan Savory or Michael Pollan, biomimicry. What are your thoughts on Paul Stamets' work in this direction? So he's saying if you're going to work or get influenced by these people in the camps.
Yeah. I know Paul Stamets. I know Alan Savory. I don't know the third guy. I know the biomimicry people. So, yeah, I think it's not about me. It's about a community of people who go together to do things. I mean, I have my own ideas, and I kind of, but basically we have, Mark Shepard is part of the cooperative, and Ben Falk is part of the cooperative, and Ramus Kent is part of the cooperative, and Daniel Halsey and Jillian Hovey, and lots of people who have worked in permaculture and in many ways are part of it, and everybody's welcome. I think that's the interesting part. Everybody can come, so it should be pretty much non-denominational. I don't think it should be. It should be, this is about a direct action on a planetary scale. We need to act as a species on a planetary scale. So if people are interested to work together, that's good. If people don't want to work together, then, they shouldn't probably go to camp. I don't think they'll enjoy it.
Hey, Neil, do you have a particular question you want to ask?
Yeah, I did want to jump in here. First of all, because so much of the pattern that you're laying out, John, has been mirrored in my own experience working with the Bedu and so on. And we're at a point now where our bottleneck is in your number 3 part of that pattern you had, where you have to have the enabling policy environment. And I'm at a point where I'm working with a lot of bureaucrats to try to shift that policy environment to such a point that our system can scale up. Because it's exactly like you said, we've built this model that is salient and very relevant, and ecologically and financially brings things back to life. But I find it's very, very difficult to get, the bureaucrats to come out of their offices and come check out the land and then see the relevance. But with respect to the camps, like the same issues that you've seen all over the planet are going to show up with respect to land rights issues, with respect to the profit motivation coming into play. And the question I want to get at is, if these camps are going and restoring productivity to the land and ecological function to the land, which in my head are kind of the same thing, that increase in productivity, ability to produce, is going to have yields. There are going to be products coming out of there. My question for you is, what do you see the path of that productivity taking? Do these camps become villages where people are farmers and they're selling stuff on the global market? What happens to the land after you sort it, and who's managing that? Because that is where all those local politics are going to come into play. That's my question for you.
Yeah, I think that's an important question, but it's one that I think I would like to sort of have solved on the ground. I think if we don't start restoring landscapes, it becomes a moot point. Because the fact is, if you look at the scientific data on climate changes, then we have a very small window of opportunity. So how do we get the most people in the world on the ground restoring organic soils, infiltrating and retaining all available moisture on the earth, and propagating and planting out the keystone species? Those are the things, those are the three basic things that I would say the camps need to teach. And so I think it takes you probably some months to become pretty capable in that, especially once the camps put in propagation units and they're showing tissue culturing, they're showing possibilities of cloning from seed, scarification, everything that's necessary for propagation, then you freely open that up to everybody. So you have to question, like, what's in it for me is not really the question that I would really ask right now. I mean, basically what we're trying to do is create a system that is beneficial to everyone. And so if you come for a few weeks or a few months to a camp and you learn these skills, then when you go to wherever you're going, whether you go back to where you started from or whether you go with a number of your family and friends to create a new eco-village, you're going to have the skills necessary to succeed. And when you add interpersonal relations and conflict resolution and meditation, and then you're even better at this. You start to understand what it's going to take to live together and to work together. Now, okay, what we've said about the camps now is we will only go where we're invited. Right now we're not looking because we just don't have the financial clout to buy land. And to buy land is almost exclusionary. I think the whole point is to be inclusive. So anybody who's going to invite people onto their land in order to study this, well, that's a nice, generous thing, isn't it? Do we want to say, well, we don't, we don't like you, why do you want to do that? I think we have to say, well, I can't change whatever happened in the past. All I can do is say, well, we're going to build a new future, and that future is going to be egalitarian, participatory, and self-governing and self-organizing. Well, that's nice, isn't it? And it's going to definitely include functional ecosystems. Well, that's where I want to go. So I think the motivation, the intention, is the intention to make income, or is the intention to grow value? And when you grow value, it's real wealth. And so everybody eats organic food. Everybody lives together and plays guitar and doesn't work too hard, and, is trying to be healthy mentally and physically and spiritually. Well, that's good. I mean, basically this whole property issue, this stuff issue, this is where so if people start to ask about that, then okay, then they have to question, what is the motivation? Is the motivation that you want to have productivity? You want to separate yourself from everybody else? Well, if somebody's asking you to, nobody's asking you to do anything. You don't come if you don't like it. I mean, that would be what I would say. But if you want to go learn these skills, then here's some place that's just setting up not to act as a commercial organization and charge you money. It's asking you, it's producing this thing because so many people care about this, and it's in all of our interest to infiltrate and retain moisture, to understand how to grow organic soils, and how to propagate and plant out keystone species. And that means we have to study the taxonomy, because each biome is going to be completely different, have different keystone species. So you need a technique, but you don't actually, the technique is transferable, but the actual species distribution and species richness is just different. So you need those techniques. Can we do that? Yeah, we can do that. If we start to ask, like, well, who benefits? Then, yeah, well, do you want to do it, or do you want to, you want to stay theoretical, or do you want to, is it more important that we say, I think we should just eliminate all this discussion and talk about function. Now, later on, you go to camp for a few months and you learn these techniques and you have 50 friends and you decide, let's go off and make a eco-village. And then they have their families and their extended families, and you can create a village. Go do that. By all means, do that. But, and then invite the camp. Invite a camp to go there, and they'll help you. And then will you say, well, we own the village, so the camp should say, well, you own the village, so we're not going to go there? I think that's wrong. If you invite us to go there to help to fix it up, and other people can be trained in there, then the camp should go. We should just say, we're not talking about this. We're talking about who wants to go fix the earth, who wants to go restore ecological function on the planet. We're not talking about how does it benefit me. It will benefit me, but it will benefit everybody. It will benefit everyone. That's the key. And, go where, it's going to benefit me because I'm going to be able to live without things in a pristine or a, empty, degraded state, which I'm going to transform. All of us together are going to transform into functional systems. So that, at 64, I just don't think that materialism is going to be satisfying. The last part of my life, I don't want to spend grasping things. I want to restore ecosystem function on a planetary scale. To see, I won't see it. I'm going to die. And so I want to see that the human civilization is moving away from the idea of materialism, away from the idea that, I stole it and it's mine, because that's the justification for, basically everything that you see right now. We don't need that. We need people to say, who are we? What am I? Well, I feel like I'm a human being, and I feel like my purpose, I have a purpose in life, and that purpose in life gives me some satisfaction. And that's completely different than the society and the governance systems that exist, and the socialization that I had, and everything I was taught. I just have to go, really? You believe that? Because it's crazy. If you look at, so, but if I look at people, if I go, Mali was a good example. If I go to the Inner Niger Delta in Mali, it's just fabulous. People, children come into my arms and sit on my lap. They never saw me before. I must be a spaceman to them. and they love me. You know, I go, well, this is great. They have nothing. Male life expectancy is 40 years old. You know, I'm 64. I'm like in way overtime for these guys. So, you know, I just want to say, let's be grateful. Let's go do the work, you know, and let's have that discussion on the ground, you know. And if we don't do this, then I think human civilization will collapse. That's what I think.
Okay, so a lot of people are asking, like Alyssa, Lawrence, Jesse, they're asking about what are some vocational training opportunities that they need before the camps? Do they need to take a PDC? What if an untrained person comes in?
I think everybody can come. There's going to be PDCs available at the camps, I think. The World Permaculture Association and the Permaculture Research Institute are planning to run courses, so if people have no skills, they can take that. If they want to come and work on ecosystem, so ecosystem restoration is one thing. There's going to be plenty to do. So if you look at the first camp we're talking about is in the Altiplano in Murcia near Andalusia, and it's a hyper-arid area, Mediterranean biome, and it's just it should be an oak savanna, but it's now, because of European agricultural subsidies, it's a failed wheat growing area with chemical agriculture and plowing, and you know, so you know it needs massive restoration. And one of the things that was mentioned earlier is by Neil was the policy, enabling policy environment. Well, Common Land has been working for more than 2 years in this area, and there's another cooperative called Al-Valal. Three counties came together. So there's thousands of farmers and people who are studying biodynamics and organic agriculture and you know all these things, regenerative agriculture, permaculture, that want to restore this area, this region. So the whole region should be restored. So the camp isn't about just restoring private property. It's restoring the hillsides, restoring forests on public lands. It's just a way to get the skills and to create giant propagation units and to have people who can go out and do the planting and to be conscious and have people able to do that. So I think that you whatever skills you get, it's good. I mean, if you're a great craftsman, you know, that's a really a great thing. We're going to have to make a lot of teepees and a lot of yurts and a lot of domes, and then we'll know which is a better temporary thing. And if you go further than that, I mean, if you have communities that invite us that really want to have permanent facilities and they have the ability to have permanent facilities, then you need earth architecture skills. But and you definitely need gardening. You need polycultures and perennials and orchardry and you know all of this stuff. Food forests, I think, would be the ideal.
Nice. Okay, so John asks, he had some concerns like Neil. He was like, thank you for massively inspiring. Number 3 of your requirements, enabling policy environment, feels like this could be the stumbling block. How do you create that when it's not present initially?
Well, I think the Rwanda example is a very good example. So I went into Rwanda, and they had just had a genocide about 10 years earlier than my visit. So I was a bit concerned. You know, 10 years before, they killed 850,000 people in 100 days. And, you know, I thought, oh, that's terrible. I remember when it was happening, I didn't go, but it was horrible what was happening. So in a sense, they reached rock bottom. You know, they were ecologically massively degraded, but spiritually or, something. I mean, people can do terrible things, right? So there it is. People did terrible things. 850,000 people died, were killed, murdered in 100 days. Well, that's bad. So they were in this place where it was very unhappy. And I went to China just after the Cultural Revolution. They were very unhappy, very unhappy people. So that made them pretty, it had a certain kind of gravitas, they had a certain kind of seriousness of purpose. So when I presented what the Chinese had done with ecosystem restoration, they listened very, very carefully, and they wanted to know more and more, and they went to China to find out more, and so on. And what they found was that this is doable and that there are principles. And when we understand these principles and we adhere to them, we get the result that we want. Then they rewrote their policy. So if you don't have this consciousness, you're not going to create a policy like this. But right now, I do spend some time speaking with political leaders, financial leaders in different parts of the world. And I have to tell you, they are terrified now because they don't have the answers. So if they're really sincere individuals, and I would say that not all leaders are corrupt or bad, many are, they're just socialized. So they accept the system that they're born into, and that's what they have, and they try to make it work. And they try to do their best, and now they're faced with problems which seem, extremely difficult. So you have migration in Europe. It's thousands of people, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people coming into Europe from the North Africa, leaving the wars, leaving the droughts, leaving the instability, and they come to Europe. Well, it's terrifying. They don't know what to do. They look at the economic thing that's happening. They look at the rise of nationalism, in the United States or elsewhere, and xenophobia. I mean, extraordinary kinds of thinking, and it doesn't look good. So they don't know. They don't have any great ideas. And if you step back and you say, well, what are we going to do? I would say that it has to do with restoration of the natural ecosystems. So, everything is falling apart. And what is the fundamental aspect? So if you want to build a house, you need a good foundation. My good friend Willem Ferreira, who's the CEO of Common Land, he said to me just yesterday, if you want to build a house, you have to make a good foundation. So Common Land's idea was build a good foundation in order to spread ecological restoration around. So that's what Common Land is trying to do. And I would say that this is what needs to be done for human civilization. Needs to have ecological function on a planetary scale for there to be peace, for there to be food security, for there to be biodiversity. That's what we need. So the policy has to follow the consciousness. So I thought after going to Rwanda that I would be able to go to all the countries of the world, but I don't know. There's still some people probably who are highly vested in the existing economy. They think they can squeeze it for a little longer, but actually I think it's done, and we need to move to the next level of human consciousness and the next level of thinking and social organization. And I think that's more horizontal than it is vertical. It benefits everyone, not benefiting a tiny elite. So let's live the change that we want to see in the world, and we can do that now in the camps. And the policy will have to follow. I would say we should just live, if the policy isn't there yet, that's because they haven't evolved yet to understand, and they just need to get further. They need to go camping.
All right, all right. Oh man, a lot of good questions still coming in. Neil, what do you reckon? Should we keep taking a whole bunch of questions, or should we do a live question, like a live call-in question? Or
I think we've hit 2.5 hours here, so it's about time to quit recording, and then we can stick around as long as we want to.
okay, yeah, that sounds
So
good.
Let's close it out and quit the recording, and then we will stay online for as long as people want to stay online.
All right, sounds good. Neil, do you want to take it out, or do you want me to take it out?
Yeah, I'll take us out since you brought us in.
All right. Sounds good.
For all of you that are joining us, we're really thankful to you, John, for coming on and talking about this magnificent vision that you've got. It's one that we share and that Raleigh and I are both trying to make happen in our own way, in our own circles of influence. And I think this kind of high-level view, because it's really easy to get into techniques and strategies and all that kind of thing, and there's a lot of discussion to be had there. But having a common vision of that this is where we need to go as a species to assume our role as, the apex species and become stewards rather than miners. I think it's something that we share and that many of our audience shares as well. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing this with us. We definitely have plans to support the camps and to be members of those. And so to all of you who are watching, thank you for your time. Thank you for coming on to Sustainable Design Masterclass. We have a lot of really good material that is highly relevant to what John is talking about. And thanks for your time. We love being able to do this. We love being able to have people like John on. So everybody have a good week. This is going to be our last webinar for 2016.
All right, everybody. We're going to call it quits for tonight. Thanks to those who watched this webinar. This was a replay by John Liu, and you can watch the replay on Colonomic Action Team website, eatcommunity.com. So we'll see you next time.